Hilchos Tzitzis, Perek Sheni. The laws of Tzitzit, chapter 2. Today is going to be all about Tchelet, all about the blue. Yesterday we learned that there's two elements to the mitzvah: the white strings, the uncolored strings, and the blue strings. And today we don't have the Tchelet, but it's a real integral part of the mitzvah. So the Rambam spends considerable time talking about it. Halacha Aleph, Tchelet ha'amura b'Torah b'chol makom. Whenever you talk about Tchelet in the Torah, because Tchelet also comes up in other places, not just by Tzitzit. You also have by the Kohen Gadol. You know, he had a me'il, a cloak that was all Tchelet. Or Mordechai, after the Purim story, it says, Mordechai yatzam lifnei HaMelech bilvush malchut Tchelet v'chor. Mordechai went out with a clothing of Tchelet. So wherever the Torah talks about Tchelet, he hatzemer hatzavua kapatuch shebakachol. It's wool that's dyed like a lighter blue. V'zuhi dmut harakia, it's supposed to be like the image of the sky, hanir'et le'en hashemesh, that you see opposite the sun, b'taharo shel rakia, when it's a clear day. So when you have a clear sky, the blue that you see next to the sun, that's the color of the tchelet. V'hatchelet ha'amura b'tzitzit, when it comes to tzitzit, the tchelet has another special law. Tzarich shetiyeh tzviata yidua. You have to color it, you have to dye it in a specific way. She'omedet b'yofya v'lo tishtaneh. That stands in its beauty and never changes. And we're going to see more about this soon. V'chol shelo nitzba b'ota tzviya pasul tzitzit. If it wasn't dyed with this special dye, it's disqualified for tzitzit. Afal pishu ke'en harakia, even though it looks like the sky. This is called in the Talmud kala ilan. There are many different ways, different plants people use to make tchelet. You can make the same color, but it doesn't stand forever. It doesn't stand up to the test. So even though it looks the same color, it's disqualified. Kigon shetzav'o bi'istis. Like for example, you colored it with istis. This is istis. It's called woad in English, or isatis. It's a yellow plant, and you can make from it blue dye. O bishchor, or with a black dye. O bish'ar hamashchirin, or with any other blackening thing. This is actually today quite common. They use this plant. It's called Indigofera tinctoria. I'm not sure how you say it. I think in Hebrew it's called Nil HaTzabaim. Nil HaTzabaim. Nil HaTzabaim. And this color, it makes the indigo dye, and so any wool that goes into it will become blue. But because they're not the special way that the sages said, Harezeh pasul tzitzit, so it's disqualified for tzitzit. Rachel bat ez tzamra pasul tzitzit. If you have Rachel is a female sheep, but it's the daughter, it's the product of a hybrid. Its parents weren't both sheep. Its father was a goat. So the wool is disqualified for tzitzit. You can't use the wool for tchelet. Now you can make a garment out of this wool and then put wool tzitzit on it. But the wool itself of this ewe, I think that's how it's pronounced, a female sheep, you can't use for tzitzit. Halacha bet. Ketzad sov'in tchelet shel tzitzit. How do we dye the blue for the tzitzis? You told me it's a special way. What's the special way? Lokchin atzemer. You take the wool that's going to be used for the tchelet, v'shorin oto b'sid, and you soak it in lime. That's lime, a bucket of lime over there.
Probably
to
bleach it.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the bleaching process. You put it in lime first. V'achar kach mechabsin oto ad sheyeh naki. Then you launder it with water till it becomes very clean. Umartichin olo be'ohala v'chayotze bo. And you heat it up in ohala. Some say ohala means aloe. Some say it means bleach. Point is, you're getting it ready to be cleaned. Kederech she'atzaba'in osin, like dyers do. Kedei sheyiklot et ha'ayin. You prepare the material to be able to absorb the color. Just putting material in dye doesn't mean it's going to become, dyed. It has to be ready to accept the dye. V'achar kach mevi'in dam chilazon. Then we bring the blood of what's called the chilazon. It's a type of snail. V'hu dag shedomal eino le'en atchelet. It's a fish, or it's a creature of the sea whose color looks like tchelet. V'damo shachor kidyo, but its blood is black like ink. Ubiyam hamelach umatzui. It can be found in the Mediterranean Sea. Yam hamelach usually means the Dead Sea. But the Rambam writes elsewhere that sometimes when he uses the word Yam hamelach, he means the Mediterranean Sea. So it's found in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Israel. And, matter of fact, the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, he writes, Ein lanu tchelet. We lost track of this chilazon. But fairly recently, Mishneh Tafresh Mem Zayin, that's like 1887, there was a Yid, the Admur Miradzin, Rabbi Gershon Henoch Leiner, and he wrote a book, Sfonei Tmunei Chol, and he said he found the chilazon It's the cuttlefish on the left here. In Hebrew, it's called Dionon HaRokchim. And he said that's the tchelet.
And where did he find that?
He found it off the coast of Israel. He said this is it. And he began to make tchelet. A couple of years later.
It's not a kosher fish.
It's true. It's true. Rabbi Herzog, the first chief rabbi of Israel, said, no, that's not it. It's this one. It's called the Sgulit du Gvanit. Or in English, you call it the janthina. That's the Kabbalah, that's the scientific word, or the violet sea snail. He said this is the tchelet, and he claims, he says that's what it was. Most of the Torah world didn't accept it, but nevertheless, that's how he said it. Or this is the cuttlefish. This is the one that Rabbi Leiner said.
It takes to make one tzitzit.
A ton. You have to go fish them out. You catch a ton of them, and you take their blood. This is a better view of the. This is a different opinion. This is called in Hebrew the argemon kehe kotzim, hexaplex trunculus. Here you can see better. This is the front view of the shell and then the back view of the shell, and the snail inside here. This is like today when they make tchelet, you buy in the store tchelet. This comes from this. They say this is it, and it's a snail, and it's not the whole snail. It's a very specific pocket.
Find them in Israel?
Yeah, exactly where the Talmud describes it. The Talmud says me'ako ad mashu, like on the coast somewhere, and that's where they found. Like that's the area they found it. No, Yam HaMelech is the Mediterranean. It's Yam HaGadol. And yeah, both. The Rambam writes in Pirush HaMishnayot שלפעמים הוא משתמש בתואר הזה בשביל the Dead Sea, and sometimes he uses it for the Mediterranean. The Machlif. Point is that this is what people say. Today, again, most of the Torah world didn't accept it, that this is the final thing, so we don't necessarily go by this. But if anybody asks you about what the chilazon is, some say this is the chilazon. V'notnin et hadam liyora. What do you do next? You put, we'll bring back the nice colorful picture over here. You put the blood of this chilazon into a pot, v'notnin imo samemanin, together with some other herbs and ingredients, kemo hakamonia v'chayotze bahem, like chamomile and something similar, kederech she'atzabain osim, like the dyers do. Umartichinoto, you heat it up, you cook it. V'notnin bo hatzemer, you put the wool in, ad sheyaseh ke'en rakia, until it's made like the color of the sky. V'zuhi ha'tchelet shel tzitzit, and that's the tchelet of the tzitzit. Halacha Gimel says the Rambam, ha'tchelet shel tzitzit tzrichat tzvi'ah lishma. Like every other part of the tefillin making and tzitzis making, the tchelet also has to be dyed with the intent that you're doing it for the mitzvah of tzitzit. V'im tzavah shelo lishma, if you dyed it without the proper intent, psula, the whole thing is disqualified. Imagine you cut 100 snails, you did the whole thing, and then when you dyed it, in the moment of dyeing, you didn't have the proper intent. That's it. Goodbye. And the pot which has the dye, im tzavaba me'at semer, if you used a little bit of wool, a little sample, livodko im hu yafeh im lav, to check if it's good or not, nifsala hayora kula. The test makes the whole pot disqualified because you didn't do that part for a mitzvah, you did it for a test. So how do you test? Ela ketzad yaseh, what do you do? Lokeach hatzeva min hayora. Take out some of the dye from the pot, bikli katan, into a small vessel. Umaniach bo tzemer shabodek bo, and put into it the wool that you're using to check, to test. V'soref et shabadak, after you tested, you have to burn that wool, because somebody might use it for tzitzit unwittingly. Shari needs ba'li v'dika, because it was only dyed for checking, not for mitzvah. Also, v'shofech hatzeva shabakli shabadak bo, the dye in the little testing vessel, you have to also spill away. Shari ta'amo upsalo, because you tasted it, metaphorically, and you disqualified it. When you color the rest of the tchelet with the other dye that wasn't ruined yet, it wasn't used for anything else but the mitzvah. Halacha daled, because it's so complicated, you can only buy tchelet from somebody who's an expert. Because chosheshin, we always have to worry. Shema nitzba shelo lishma. Maybe it was dyed not for the proper intent. And afal pishin yilkecha min hamumche. Even if you bought it from an expert, im nivdeka, if you checked it, v'nod'a, and it came out, shenitzba'a be'echad mish'arav tzivonim ha'mashchirin she'enan omdin. It came out that it was checked, that it was dyed with one of those black dyes that don't stand, they don't go to the test. Psula is disqualified. How do you check? Halacha hey, ketzad botkin ota ad sheyivada im nitzba'a kilchata im lav. How do we check it till we know if it was colored properly or not? Lokchin teven virir shel shablu. Very specific. You take straw and the drool of a snail, and urine that stayed old for 40 days. And many times in halacha we find that 40-day-old urine was very potent to expose untruthful ingredients of different things, different dyes, different stains. It's going to come up a few times in the Rambam. And you put the wool into this mixture for 24 hours. If it stood up to the dye, it didn't even diminish a little bit, it's kosher. But if it did diminish, that's already a sign that something's fishy. It's not fully fishy yet, but we're going to do another test. You take a specific barley dough that people would usually use to turn into brine, to pickling brine. And this diminished tchelet, you put it inside this bread. Bake the dough in an oven. And after the baking, you take out the wool and now you check. If it got even further diminished, psula, it's disqualified. But if it got blacker, darker than it was before the baking, then you know that the other test wasn't so reliable and kshera, it's still kosher. I should show you today, is this guy on YouTube I found, very interesting. Can you see him? You can't see him yet. And he did a similar test. Okay, I don't want a kosher who's not wearing a yarmulke, but whatever. He did a test. He took tchelet that they make today from that snail that I showed you before, then blue dye that they make from a plant, that one I showed you before, the indigo fera, and a blue dye which you make from this little growing thing. It's called in Hebrew lishishita kotzim. It's like a type of little plant. And he put them all to the test, not with the Rambam's version, but with economica. You know, like what do they call it like bleach? Yeah, proper bleach. Okay, and look what happened over here.
יש לי פה 3 סוגים של כחול או תכלת. תכלת מהחילזון, תכלת מודרנית מצביעה בימינו, והתכלת שהפקתי מלשישית הצבעים. אני מוזג אקונומיקה לכל אחת מהצלוחיות כדי לעשות בקרת איכות איזו תכלת מחזיקה מעמד. אני לוקח את התכלת מהחילזון, טובל בפנים, כחול מבעד בין ימינו, טובל בפנים, וניקח פה כמה פתילים שצבעתי מהלשישית, ואני טובל בפנים. אגב, גם חכמים בימי קדם ערכו ניסוי דומה, רק שלבקרת איכות, במקום להשתמש באקונומיקה, הם השתמשו בשתן שעבר עליו 40 יום. כן, שתן אנושי של בן אדם שעברו עליו 40 יום. חיכינו 3 דקות ותראו מה קרה. זה צבע כחול בין ימינו ותראו מה קרה לו, התפרק לחלוטין. בואו רגע נראה את התכלת שצבענו מהלשישית, דהה לחלוטין. ועכשיו נעבור אל תכלת שצבעו מהחילזון, אין שום השפעה, נשארה בדיוק כמו שהיא הייתה.
Is that incredible? Halacha Vav. Chatzer shemachrin batchelet. A courtyard. A little area where they know that's where you buy tchelet. They sell over there the blue wool. V'hayu muchzakin bekashrut. And they had a presumption of kosherness. Everybody knew they were kosher. Lokchin mimena stam ve'en tzarich b'dika. Once the store, gets a certain stamp of approval, now you don't have to check it every time you buy from there. They're reliable. You buy and you go home. V'harei bechezkata ad shetechashed. It's in its presumption until there's suspicion. Hamafkid tchelet etzel akuti. If you deposit some blue wool by a goy, you have to automatically assume that it's disqualified. Perhaps he changed it. But if it was in a container, and it was sealed with 2 seals, chotam betoch chotam, a seal inside a seal, kshera, it's kosher. Bechotam echad, if it was only sealed with 1 seal, psula, then it's disqualified. By the way, the same laws apply to kashrut. We say if you leave meat, you're a mashgiach, right? If you leave meat not closed, open with a guy's presence, we say he might have changed it. But if it's double sealed, then it's kosher. So whenever you get from Toast Cafe over here and you buy it, you order food with an Uber, they always give it to the Uber guy double sealed, double wrapped. Or you get, if you're flying in El Al and you get a meal, it's always double wrapped because kosher food, when it's double sealed, then there's no suspicion. So this is another area in halacha where the same rule applies when it comes to tchelet. Halacha zayin, hamotzei tchelet bashuk. If you find blue wool in the market, afilu matzah chutin psukin, even if you found it in threads, so like somebody obviously made it for tzitzit, no reason to suspect it, psula, it's disqualified. You didn't find it in a reliable place, you have to assume it's bad. Shizurin, but if you found threads that were already entwined, like I showed you yesterday, every tzitzit string has multiple strings, so then people don't go to that bother for no reason. It was obviously for tzitzit, kshera. The Rambam says it's kosher. By the way, some texts over here say still psula. But the Rambam in most texts it says kshera, that it's kosher if it's entwined. Halokech talit mitzuyetzet. min hashuk mi Yisrael. If you buy a talis with already made tzitzit on it from the market from a Jew, harehi bechezkata, you can assume that it's kosher and it's okay. Min akuti, but if you buy this talit with tzitzit from a goy, hatagar, if he's a merchant, there you go, a businessman, kshera, then it's kosher because there's no reason for him to have an agenda. He's just reselling what he bought. Min ha'edyot, but if it's a regular person, psula, you don't know what he did with it, you know where it came from, it's disqualified. Says the Rambam halacha chet, talit shehi kula aduma o yiruka o mish'ar tzivonin. If you have a talis, a cloak or a garment that's all red or green or other colors, oseh chutei lavan shela ke'ein siva. The white strings that you attach to it don't have to be white. White means uncolored. So if you have a red talit, you should make the strings the same color. Im yiruka yirukin, maduma adumin. If they're green, make the tzitzit green. If they're red, make the tzitzit red. Hayta kulat chelet. What if the talit was all blue? So now you can't make all the strings blue. Only one string can be blue. Oseh lavan shela mish'ar tzivonim. Make the white strings from a different color. Chutz min hashachar. Don't use black. It looks like blue. And then, whatever color you choose, v'korech al hakol chut echad tchelet, and you wrap on the rest of it one string of blue, kederech she'osin b'shar tzitziyot she'enan svuin, like you do with other tzitzit that's not colored. By the way, today we rule that you always make white. We don't do other colors. Right with the color one, a blue talis, but white strings. Yeah, he had white strings. Halakha tet, kasher onesh mi she'eno maniach lavan yoter me'onesh shelo yiniach tchelet. The punishment of somebody who doesn't use white strings is worse than somebody who doesn't use the blue wool. Because the blue wool is not so accessible. If isha lavan, matzoy lakol, the white material everybody has. And the blue wool is not found at every place and every time. Because of the special coloring, which we said, it's special ingredient, special test, and therefore it's not always there. So you get excused if you don't have it. But the white strings, everyone's got to have.